Hey everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're joining me for the first time, my name is Melissa Reed and I am a mixed media artist from Pennsylvania. So today I am working with a smaller canvas than I usually do. This is one of the Michaels Artist Loft level 3 gallery wrapped canvases in a 5x7. I'm choosing this one actually not necessarily for the size, although I am interested in trying a smaller piece because I typically do them just slightly larger than this. I do those 12x6 cradled boards a lot, but I had this and I really kind of wanted this shape. I wanted this rectangular shape for this project. So what I'm thinking here is I'm going to start by doing a little bit of collage, and I'm going to just cut out some loose rectangular shapes and glue them down to the canvas, and then I'm going to cover the whole thing with this matte black paint that I have. I really love this. This is what I typically use to paint the sides of my pieces. I like it because it's a nice, opaque, high coverage paint. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of this Winsor & Newton Pale Olive, which I love. Now, I don't typically start with too much of an idea in mind, but I had this black and olive green, pale olive color combination in my head. So we're gonna see what happens. I don't know what the finished product is going to look like, because that's where the intuitive part comes in, but I'm gonna just get started and see where we go. Let's check it out.
Okay, so my plan here once I get this canvas unwrapped is to take that book page that I have sitting there, fold it in half, and just cut out some rough rectangular shapes. I did lose some footage here at the very end. I think I might have forgotten to press record, so it's going to go from me trimming off the edges to having paper already glued down, but just trust me, I cut out some squares and used my matte medium to go ahead and glue them down. So next up, I have a little bit of that matte black paint on my plate over there, and I'm just using a little flat brush to cover the entire surface. Now it's going to look shiny right now because it's wet and I have an overhead light shining directly on it, but it's going to dry completely matte black, which I love. So the point of putting down those squares that I'm now covering up wasn't really to get the book text on there. It was mostly just for the texture that I wanted underneath, because I'm going to go back over this with a few different layers, and you'll see in the very end of the video how those squares come back through when I put the final layer on. So once I get as much black as I want on the surface there, and I should say I want solid black on the bottom, but I also want it to go up a little bit because I want the colors to overlap. But at the very top, I don't want any color because I'm going to want that pale olive to have its true color come through. I had a lot of people ask me this. This is what I used to do the sides, and since I had that black out, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I've found that this is the absolute easiest way to paint the sides of paintings. It goes very, very quickly, as you can see, and there's relatively little mess. So this is just a sponge roller that I got in a package of just assorted rollers at Michaels. I don't remember how much it was, but it wasn't very much. It's just their Artist Loft brand, and it gives really great coverage very, very quickly with minimal mess. And I have like a little rack that I bought at I think I got it at an Army surplus store, and I think its original intention was for test tubes, but it's just a little, maybe like 8x3 inch rack. And that's what I used to set everything on to dry. I'd started out originally just setting it on my workspace, which is covered in paper, but sometimes that paint ends up on the bottom, even though I try not to get it there, and then there's like little pieces of paper stuck to it. So I've found that the best way to dry this is just to have it elevated on something so that it's not really touching anything and can't damage the area that you're painting or the surface underneath it. So now that the black has completely dried, I'm going in with that pale olive directly out of the tube, and I'm just using it to go down the canvas there. I want the most saturation of the color up top and a pretty full coverage there too. And as you can see, I'm starting up there and kind of pulling it down with my brush because I don't necessarily want that completely covered at the bottom. I want to be able to see some of the black, and I also definitely want to be able to see the black through some of that green because that's the actual effect that I'm going for there. And I'm already really liking the way that these two colors are working together. Now, I did think there was a little too much green on there, so I just went ahead and took a plain sheet of paper, and I am picking up a little bit of that color there. And in doing so, it revealed a little bit more of the black underneath, and it also revealed some of the text from the book pages, which I kind of like. I don't know if I'll end up seeing it at the end because I don't know what I'm doing, but I like it for now. And I'm just taking a bamboo skewer there and scratching some circular shapes into there. Again, not really any purpose at this point, just getting different layers and textures down on the canvas to add more visual interest at the end. Okay, so while I was working on everything else, I decided that I wanted to do the image of a raven over top of this. So I am actually going to do an inkjet transfer. I went ahead and used that site that I was talking about previously called unsplash.com, and I'll put a link to that in the description for you. These are all royalty-free images that you can use for your work. I printed it up on my regular inkjet printer, trimmed it just so that I could tell where the top of the head was in relation to the gel plate, and then I just sprayed it with a little bit of water. I'm just making sure that the entire surface is damp but not dripping wet, so I went ahead and took up the rest of the water, pulled it, and it left a lovely print. That only takes, it happens almost instantaneously, just FYI. So I'm adding a little bit of my matte gel medium there and rolling it on because I'm going to pick up this image with a piece of my regular tissue paper. And if you've done prints on tissue paper, it also transfers pretty quickly. I know if you're using regular copy paper, sometimes it takes a couple of minutes, but this is speeded up, but I did not edit any time out there, so it probably only took about a minute or so after I laid that down to be able to pull up my print. Now you want to do it very carefully because the tissue paper is fragile and it's a little bit damp from the matte medium, but I really haven't had too many issues with that. Occasionally I will lose a piece with tearing, but just be careful and you should be okay. So I've got my bird there and I let it finish drying, and now I'm just going to cut out a rough shape around there. I'm not worried about getting too close to the image. You definitely can, but I know I'm going to be doing more collage and painting on top of it, so any of those edges that are still visible will most likely be getting covered up anyway. And since I am using the matte medium and that is tissue paper, a lot of that is just going to kind of disintegrate into the background anyway, so it's really not something to fuss too much about. I almost cut the bird's foot off there, but that ends up not mattering anyway because I'm able to glue it down regardless, but I also end up having that part covered up entirely in the end. But you know what, mistakes happen, you just kind of have to roll with it. So I'm going to go ahead and use my matte medium, like I said, to get the bird glued down here once I have everything cut out as I want it. And I'm going to use my card to smooth it to get the excess medium off once it's down there. Just be very careful when you're doing that using tissue paper because of course it is, like I said, very delicate, and even just the pressure and friction of using that card on there, it is likely to pull up pieces and tear. It happens to me all the time. I can usually fix them though. I keep a little pen and nib handy that has a very fine point on it. I'm going to be pulling that out here in a minute, and that has come in really handy. Anything with a fine point will work, even if you have maybe like an old ballpoint pen that doesn't have any ink left in it, just something so that you can get up underneath that, an old pair of tweezers, anything to move the paper if it does get a little bit messed up for you there. So I'm actually going over, because the areas of the feet are extremely thin and delicate, I didn't even really go over those with the card too much. You might have seen there, I just went over them with my finger to smooth everything down because I was trying to eliminate as much potential of ruining the image as possible. But it's on there pretty well. I did go ahead and take that pen and nib and do a little bit of scratching just to get some of that underneath black revealed, just because I wanted to have a little bit more interest and a little bit of variation in color. So after sitting for a while and trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I had thought about maybe putting some flowers on here, but I ended up just deciding to take some Grumbacher red on one of my brayers and rolling it on the piece in some areas. So the majority of the concentration of the color is at the bottom left corner, but I did want to carry that through around all of the sides and the corners of the piece just to have some continuity. And it kind of actually creates its own little frame. But you can see there how those rectangles that I collaged on in the beginning, those are coming through a lot more now with that red that I'm brayering on, and that is an effect that I was really hoping to get. So I wanted to have some red drips, and the amount of paint that went on there with the brayer wasn't going to create that. So I did go in with my brush and add a little bit more in that upper right hand corner and sprayed it. It started to drip down, but I wasn't happy with the concentration, so I did go back in just with a little bit of the paint on the brush. It's still very wet from where I sprayed it, and I'm using that water to coax it down to get those drip marks. And then I decided that I wanted to do the same thing over on the other side just to carry it through a little bit. What I wanted was some of the bird to be covered up, so like more layers. I'm always talking about layers, but that's what I think makes work interesting. I don't want everything to be on top of the canvas, so I want it to look like there are things underneath other things, and this is just one of the ways that I do that. So once I got that paint on, I decided that I was going to let it dry and do a little bit more work. I did cheat a little bit, and I got out my hairdryer to quick dry it, which is one wonderful thing with the acrylic paint. And then I wanted to go in and define some of the dark parts and add some shadow around the bird. And I just got a new set of charcoal pencils the other day, so I thought I would break those out and give them a try. I wanted to use the charcoal instead of like a micron pen or something, which would have worked just as well, but with the charcoal I can go ahead in and blend and create shadows to add a little bit more dimension, and it's going to be a little bit easier with the charcoal. Not impossible with a micron pen. You could of course use cross hatching, or a lot of different things that you could do with that. But I had these, and honestly it was just like a new toy that I wanted to play with, so I thought that I would pull those out for this piece, and I'm happy with the way it turned out. So I'm just going in and playing with a little bit of shading there, trying to emphasize the roundness of the bird's head and do some line work there to accentuate the beak. And I'm going to go in and fill in the eye just a little bit. I'm basically doing all of this because while I liked that it was pulled into the background, I did want parts of it to be out front. So you'll see that I am not just straight outlining the whole figure there. I'm going around the red drips. I had thought about doing this step before putting on the red paint, and I could have, but because it is charcoal, when I sprayed it, I was going to run the risk of the black charcoal marks running as well, which is a cool effect if you want it, but that's not really what I wanted to have happen here. So I chose to just put the paint on first and then go in and kind of work around those marks with the charcoal pencil to create that depth that I was looking for. I don't know about you all, but for me, when I am in this stage of a piece where I'm kind of just doing the final embellishments and adding on little bits and pieces of things to really polish and refine everything, this part could actually take me longer than the main part of making the piece. It's really hard to sometimes stop because I'll just keep getting these ideas and think, oh, I should just keep going with this and I can add a little bit more there. So at some point I have to just stop myself and hold it back and take a look at it and say, am I happy enough with this? Is this where I want to stop? And the answer is usually yes. It's very, very easy to do more than I really wanted to. So that's what I did at this point. But I didn't actually stop there, because once I had the drawing done, I decided I wanted to put some of those charcoal lines around the edges that I do. I like to use this dark charcoal to smooth it. It creates a nice framed shadowy effect, and I just love the way that it looks. Incidentally, I did find some charcoal. I actually found it in my studio that I had that I didn't know that I had, because I was telling you I had that piece of really black charcoal, but this is almost the same thing and it's working very well for me. So I'm just smoothing that on so that I don't have any rough edges there, and it's kind of shaded outward, and I really like the way that looks. But here's the finished piece, and I'm really pleased with it. Like I said, I had no idea what it was going to be when I went into it, just had that color scheme in mind, and I ended up adding the raven and the red, and I just love the mood of the whole piece. It kind of goes along with the whole fall feeling that I've had lately. I'll probably be doing a lot more of these kinds of paintings coming up, but you never know, I may throw you a curveball also. But anyway, thank you all for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you again. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out, and if you want to give a thumbs up, that would be great too. All of these little things helps push my channel out to more people, and it costs you absolutely nothing. But even if you don't do those things, I really appreciate you being here and sticking with me through this video today, and I can't wait to show you something new next week. Take care and have a great day.